State governments have been on a massive spending splurge on infrastructure like roads, rails, bridges, and they usually get the federal government to pay a fair whack of that. Well, Federal Transport Minister Catherine King looked at the rising costs, the soaring interest rates, the blowouts, and said, let's save $7 billion.
There are 50 projects that have been cancelled.
Now that $7 billion is going to be used to pay for the cost blowouts of the remaining projects, but the screams from the states today.
The infrastructure cuts announced this morning by the Federal Infrastructure Minister are a body blow to Queensland.
Every dollar that is currently allocated to those projects must stay in Victoria.
State government's deeply disappointed.
When the Minister said that the Commonwealth would back projects that are contracted, we expect her and her government to stick to its word.
Joining me is Sky News presenter James Macpherson and Liz Storer, both of the late debate here on Sky at 10 p.m. Liz, I tell you what, the squeals tell you the party is over.
It is indeed, which is strange because it's rare to find a Labor Party that is happy to cut spending. So, if anything, the party's just getting started, Andrew. But obviously, we pay out on them for not cutting down on spending, which is what we want to see. We keep being lectured by them, you know, spending drives inflation. Well, we want to get that down. And we were warned by the Monetary Fund as well as the RBA just earlier this month that it is this roads and rail boom that is driving those prices up, that is really playing a fair whack in terms of driving prices up, driving inflation in our nation. So I can understand why the states are very disappointed. I had to laugh at Treasurer Cameron Dick's tweet after this announcement today. He said the federal government needs to start treating us more like Qantas and less like Qatar. But the review that she's acting on as well recommended that 83 projects were to be axed. She's only axed 50, and I'd love to know what got those 33 off the chopping block and if there's some sort of pork barrelling going on, because why were they saved?
Count on it, Liz. Count on it, Liz. I mean, James Macpherson, seriously, all those projects, they always announce them and so little effort into thinking how they're going to be funded. Interest rates going up. Well, I think the penny has dropped. It can't keep going.
Yeah, well, it's a bit rich of the states to cry poor after their own chronic economic mismanagement. But of course, with the Labor government in Canberra, they thought other people's money was just going to keep on rolling in. And now they're disappointed to find, no, eventually socialists run out of other people's money. But if they're going to get upset with the federal government, instead of being upset that the government have cut infrastructure spending, they should be upset that the government has not cut immigration, because that's what's driving the need for this massive expansion of infrastructure. So if the states want to be upset, that's the thing they should be upset about.
That's so correct. The feds let in more than 500,000 people in a year. We've got to then build the states have got to build the roads and all that. Well, of course, that's the problem. Tell them to cut immigration. But Liz, I said at the start, and my wife said, oh, you're a bit too early on this, you know, that I have the feeling that Anthony Albanese's leadership now is in serious strife. I know it's still ahead in the polls, but what we saw today just sort of underlines it. I think it's a bit cooked. How do you feel?
Absolutely, because we all know so much of politics is optics. And right now we've got the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis. We've got any number of problems going on here at home. And this guy can't get enough of jetting off here, there and everywhere. And this is following his worst news poll results just earlier this month since the 2022 election. But he doesn't seem to be too worried about it. I had to laugh at one of the cartoons I saw in the paper recently of Albo in a plane looking down going, oh, well, the problems don't look so big from up here. But that is how Australians are feeling. And the optics are absolutely dreadful. You've spent the first half, depending on when he calls the next election, first half of your prime ministership ragging on about your favourite pet project while we all perish just trying to put food on the table. And now that's over, you just seem to be on a perpetual trip round the world shaking hands with leaders from here, there and everywhere.
Yeah, but James, you know, he's still got a year and a half to go. I guess you can, yeah, that's a long time in politics. You can turn the ship around, but I don't know. I think I've heard something snap.
Andrew, we've still got a year and a half to go. I wish you hadn't said that. You've depressed me now. And think of how his own ministers are feeling. Anthony Albanese is starting to appear like the dog that chased the car only to catch the car and then realise he didn't quite know what to do with it. Why is Anthony Albanese in the lodge? Although he's rarely in the lodge, he's usually on an aeroplane, but you know what I mean. Why is he the Prime Minister? He's not seeming to really achieve much at all, aside from be out of the country. And Liz talked about what's happened today. Think about this High Court decision. The Home Affairs Minister said the government couldn't come up with any legislation to stop it. Then the Immigration Minister said we could have come up with legislation if only we had the reasons for the High Court decision. And now the Deputy Prime Minister today has said, no, we can come up with alternate legislation. So all of this bumbling is going on. And where's the Prime Minister? He's overseas somewhere. I can understand why there might be rumblings on the benches of the Labor government right now because Anthony Albanese is missing in action and it's affecting the country for sure, but it's also starting to affect his own team.
And Liz has made Claire O'Neill look like a fool in Home Affairs and her deputy, the Immigration Minister, even bigger one. I mean, it's an authority thing too. When she had this shtick in Parliament of, oh, we're tougher than you, you know, Peter Dutton, you were hopeless in immigration. That is now gone, okay? That's now gone. She's got to just zip it now after this humiliation.
This is what happens when you put a woman in a man's job, Andrew. Seriously, Dutz was so strong on border protection. I can say it. I'll say it for all of us. He was so strong on border protection. He was so strong in her portfolio when he was in charge of immigration. And this is what Australians want to see. If you're going to have a hard-headed person in any portfolio, you want it to be that one. What the Labor government has done here in terms of these 83 criminals that have been released into society, 93 more still pending, among them pedophiles, rapists and murderers, is absolutely unconscionable. There is no excuse for it whatsoever. And all we've heard Claire do is try to make it a blame game, which is absolutely pathetic when you've got people sitting at home worried about who's now just roaming around potentially in their very own streets.
Yes, they don't seem to get release these criminals around the lodge or anywhere like that. It's where working class voters are. Liz Thorough, James Macpherson, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it.